Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where every day we dive into the latest happenings and innovations in the world of business and technology and how those worlds collide. So I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and I'm thrilled to have you alongside riding shotgun on this journey of discovery. And today we've got a great guest lined up again. He's a return guest. His name is Joop van der Voort, and he's the CEO of Remote, which is a company that's been revolutionising the way business operate globally for many years now. But more recently, they've been making waves with their groundbreaking studies on the diversity benefits of hiring remote talent. And they appeared back on my radar when I saw the Remote Tech Talent Report, which surveyed over 1,000 hiring decision makers around the world. And it shed some light on the transformative impact of remote hiring, particularly in emerging markets. And it struck me that report resonates with the UN Sustainable Development Goals of promoting inclusive and sustainable economic growth, while also reducing inequality. But at the same time, I know it is a fine balance, and it's a much more complicated matter than that. And that's probably why we still see many businesses being hesitant to venture into global recruitment, especially when they're having to navigate huge challenges around legal requirements, time zone differences, language barriers, and much more. So today I want to be discussing more about these findings in details and also explore potential solutions to some of these challenges with Joop. And he is the perfect guy for that. So buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you're listening in the world, I'm going to beam your ears all the way to the Netherlands, where Joop is waiting to join us once again on Tech Talks Daily. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Thanks, Neil. I'm Joop. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Remote. And Remote is a company that helps other organizations hire people anywhere in the world.
And I can't believe this, but it's actually been 2.5 years since we last spoke. First of all, where did that time go? And what's been keeping you so busy since we last spoke?
A few things. My son and my daughter, but above all, my company. I think last we spoke, we probably had maybe 12 employees, maybe 50. I'm not sure. We have over 1,000 right now just working for our company, and tens of thousands of people in the world that we pay out every single month.
And the world has changed so much in that 2.5 years as well. There's a big reason I invited you back onto the podcast today. And first of all, I've got to ask you, how has remote hiring contributed to your company's environmental, social and governance metrics? And why is that so important in today's business landscape?
The reason why we started Remote is because I want that, independent of who you are, where you are, you have access to great opportunities. And I believe that by making it very easy to hire people all across the world, that's a really good way to do it. Now, there's a very nice thing that comes with that, which is that all those people that work all over the world remotely, they don't need to travel to the office.
Yeah.
And so, if you just think about, for example, the carbon footprint of any given individual, if you compare somebody who works remotely versus someone who does not, it's a very large difference just by itself. Let alone if you think about how remote organizations tend to travel less than those that are office-based, right? Because they're much more comfortable with using video tools, for example, and working asynchronously. So, that's a pretty important way.
It really is. And it's amazing how the conversation has evolved over the last few years. And one of the things that put you back on my tech radar was the Remote's global survey about the state of global tech talent and the whole market out there, and its impact also on diversity and inclusion. So can you set the scene by telling me a bit more about that report and some of the key findings from it?
Yeah, I mean, we regularly do these kind of reports where we do research in a particular market or particular country, or sometimes globally, to see, what is the impact of doing this the way we do, and how does it compare to companies that don't, right? Be that building a distributed company, hiring remotely, etc. And one of our theses has been that if you, like us, hire anybody from anywhere, and diverse organization is built automatically, as long as you keep your biases in check, right? So if you make sure you're aware of your biases and you interview people from all over the world, you will have a very diverse team. And of course, that is one of the things that we found as well. It is significantly easier to build a diverse team if you hire people from anywhere.
And another big talking point, of course, as well, is around remote hiring and how that can actually help organisations achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals too, particularly in promoting things like inclusive and sustainable economic growth and reducing inequality. Is there anything you can share around that as well and the kind of things that you're seeing?
Yeah, again, this is essentially our mission, right? Is to give everybody access to greater opportunities. Why do we want to do that? So that any individual can build wealth for themselves. Now, having access to talent abroad has always been a thing, but it usually came in the format of outsourcing, right? And what we are saying is we're saying, well, you can just hire any great person anywhere in the world. And then we encourage you to, if we make sure that there's enough competition over that talent, they are automatically encouraged to actually provide them a great salary. And so what we are seeing is what I hoped to have seen, and luckily we are seeing it, is that average salaries and compensation is rising, in particularly in areas where it was historically incredibly low, right? For example, everybody knows that there's large outsourcing teams in India. But if we look at, for example, what the average developer there employed through remote earns, it's factors higher than what you typically see in outsourcing organizations. And so that is exactly the kind of line that we hope to go, and that is exactly what is happening.
And another big trend I've seen since we last spoke was around digital nomads and nations embracing digital. I've seen a lot of digital nomad visas appearing in Southeast Asia. And in a few weeks, in fact, I'm going to Estonia, because what they're doing now is they're having the digital nomads where freelancers or contractors can work over there. But equally, we could stay here in the UK, or you could stay there in the Netherlands and launch your startup in Estonia too. So I'm seeing a lot of big changes here and a lot of attitudes changing as well. And despite all this, though, I find myself here in the UK, despite the benefits of remote hiring, 34% of UK respondents still limit their remote hiring practices to their domestic market. What do you think about this? And what are the implications of this kind of limitation on a business?
I mean, I'm a natural optimist, right? I believe it's a matter of time before they see the advantage, and maybe they simply haven't seen the light yet, so to say, of the ability to hire. So, but of course, it's very limiting, right? Even if you hire remotely, you only do it within your own country, you're going to be extremely limited by one type of population. You're going to be extremely limited in the talent pool relative to literally the entire planet, or at least the time zone in which you are in, which tends to hold a lot more people than just the country you are in. And ultimately, it will make it harder for you to build a great workforce. It's as simple as that, right? If you have two companies next to each other and one only hires locally or even just within the country in which you are in, and the other one hires across the time zone or across the world, it will be much easier for that second company to grow and to do so successfully. Besides the fact that, for example, in the UK, it's average wages are pretty high, especially if you're in and around London, for example. You will, even if you pay people incredibly well, you will still save money by hiring people internationally. So it's such a simple thing. It's such an obvious thing. And I understand the companies are hesitant to do so, but luckily there are now good solutions to solve this problem, one of which I built myself.
And the thing is, I think you and I are both optimists and we would always do the right thing. But I suspect there would be a few businesses out there that might be tempted to do it for the wrong reasons. But by that, I mean, obviously going to maybe an area that is not as doing as economically well and the wages are much lower, and think, well, why would I pay somebody here in the UK X amount when I can pay someone less overseas? Is that something that businesses still do? Or I'm just curious what you see around that.
No, we still see that. And we see that in a massive way still. The fact is that the easier we make to hire people internationally, the more we create competition between companies for that local talent. So that if you are being employed by one of these organizations that does not want to pay you fairly, then there are other opportunities available to you. right? That is the only way. Like in the end, I very much think about the market for talent as true market, right? Where it's supply and demand. And so if there's sufficient demand for international talent, and like there is always more demand for talent than there is supply, it's just a matter of, pointing the spotlight on people outside of maybe the place where you have your office. So if we keep doing that, this will sort itself out, but it will take a while. Sure, the pandemic has moved things incredibly fast, but it's only a few years since then. And these kind of large changes, they take decades.
Yeah, and I think one of the huge important factors playing a part now is the importance of diversity of thought. If a business needs to serve a diverse audience, they need a diverse workforce. And also, particularly in the tech industry, when it comes to solving incredibly complex problems, you need diversity of thought. You need people from different backgrounds, different nations, different ways of thinking. But I'm curious, what are the main challenges faced by companies when hiring remote talent from, let's say, different regions? And that's going to bring different legal requirements, time zones, language barriers. You've probably seen it all a million times, but what are the main challenges that you see?
Yeah, I guess we very much believe at Remote we solve the hardest one, which is companies don't really know what they don't know either, right? Their point of view is, well, in the UK, if I want to hire something, this is the way it's gone. These are the kind of benefits that I need to provide. And this is how it works, from going from hiring to having somebody on your payroll to then eventually that person moving on to another job. That entire process in every country in the world is completely different. Like we have not found two countries that are so similar we could essentially do the same thing. And so that means that you have to somehow understand all of this. Now, this is the thing that we solve with Remote, which is all the compliance, all the taxes, all the payroll, the benefits, etc. The other hardest thing, if I were to call two things the hardest, the one that we can solve, the other hardest thing is one that you mentioned, which is time zones. So if you have somebody in a different time zone, if it's a few hours, let's say 3-4 hours or so of a difference, that doesn't really affect anybody. As long as you're somewhat flexible with what working hours are, or fully flexible, it really is no problem. You have enough overlap to overcome even companies that are not very good at remote working. The problems come when you have teams in very dispersed time zones, so that they are 6+ hours away from each other. You have to be really diligent about the way you work together, work asynchronously, right? Primarily relying on text and sending each other videos, etc. And that is something that can be quite hard. And the advice we give companies is that if you're building out a team, make sure that the team is close in time zone, and that only very experienced remote workers are able to really have this team that is truly globally distributed. Also, keeping teams small helps a lot. Well, language barriers, it's funny that you say that I've never really seen that be an issue. Certainly there's preference, and certainly there's some people are very fluent in English, which tends to be the going language, and others less so. But other than just saying to each other and communally agreeing on the fact that, well, if you're not fluent, you might say things in a different way, and they might sound weird to someone else's ears, right? Whether they are native or not. So, assume good intent with which whatever people are saying, but that really solves most of it, because most of the companies we speak to, they use English as the main language internally. There are some exceptions, and those companies, they struggle to expand internationally. It's as simple as that.
And I'm conscious we did last speak 2.5 years ago, and in that conversation we spoke a lot about remote and how you're helping companies. And for anyone that's just tuning in and hearing about remote for the first time, could you just offer a very quick overview on the kind of problems that you're solving for businesses now? You're helping make this journey a little bit easier.
Yeah, so remote is what is known as an employer of record. So that means that if you have a person in another country that you want to hire, we take care of literally everything. So that means that we can onboard them through our own entity, which is a local entity. So if you hire someone in Belgium, that person will be employed through Remote Belgium. We can take care of payroll, benefits, compliance, taxes, really anything related to the employment of that person. You just treat that person as a regular employee, manage their payroll and whatever else in our platform. And we help you make sure, we make it very easy for you to actually do all of that. So you don't have to understand how Belgian payroll works to be able to do that through us. We do literally all of that. And whether that person is employed directly through us, whether you employ them yourself, whether they are a contractor, we can handle all those kind of cases. And we can do that virtually anywhere in the world.
Wow. And I'm curious, when businesses come to you and the conversations that you're having with so many clients around the world, they probably have a lot of perceptions about global hiring, about the kind of challenges. What are the top ones? And also, are there any myths around global hiring that you probably hear about and frustrate you that we can just lay to rest once and for all today?
Yeah, I think, I mean, starting with the myths, I think many organizations perceive hiring in certain countries as very risky, for example, or very, very difficult. And what we find is that it is certainly different for every country in the world. Every country has companies that hire and fire and move through people. And so there's always a solution independent on which country you are in. I think that is one of the biggest ones that we encounter. I think if you think about like what are the questions companies ask, many, it's what's very interesting to see is that it really depends on where that company is domiciled. So US companies tend to focus very much on how do I do healthcare in this country? Because in the US, this is like a crucial part of total compensation, total rewards for any given employee. For most of the rest of the world, that's not really a thing, or not a thing at all even. So that's really interesting always to tell companies about. And then many of them are very interested in understanding like what are the total costs. So we build a calculator for this. Or for example, how do you deal with particular other rewards like stock options, which is a really, really complicated and continuously changing subject.
Wow, it's just incredible. And given this, there are only a small percentage of UK managers considering hiring talent from Asia, Middle East and Africa, etc. How can companies better broaden their search for talent in these regions and tap into their potential? And something else that I see from the interviews that I've had throughout the years is different areas in the world, different regions, even in the US, you can split it up into different regions, that certain areas excel in certain skills, don't they?
Yeah, I don't know if that it really depends, of course, on what you're searching for. But what I advise companies to do is to just say that they are hiring remotely and hiring in particular regions. Really, it's just that. Say, posting a job ad, for example, on LinkedIn and saying you can work from wherever you want, including, all of Asia. What we see, and this is a metric that LinkedIn reported, that only of all vacancies, only 14% or so were fully remote, but more than 50% of the applications to those vacancies are to remote jobs. So that means that the demand for remote work is incredibly high. And so even though as an organization want to attract talent, you really at this point, all you have to do is say you can work remotely and you will see significant interest, to the point where at remote, we get literally tens of thousands of applications a month to work directly for us. So that's not for our customers. No, that's to work directly for us. And, if we're a large company, but we can't hire tens of thousands of people a month.
And for any business leader listening, what steps can businesses better take to not only hire remote workers from diverse backgrounds, but also ensure that they're successful in onboarding and integrating them into the company's culture? Because I think one of the things we've seen over the last 3 years is we've had people even in physical jobs where they're usually working inside an office. They've been onboarded online, they've been recruited online, and they're working every day, never actually seen their colleague in person. When they do meet them, I think they're either taller or smaller than they thought they were. And I think I suppose what I'm trying to ask here is, what's the best way of making them feel engaged and important in that company culture?
I think the most important thing is that the entire organization is remote default. So everybody is working remotely, and it's not like, oh, you're the remote worker and everybody else is in the office. If that's the case, it will never work out. But if everybody is working remotely, even if you have an office, but you use the office as essentially a co-working space where you do your work virtually, it makes the experience for that individual much better because everybody is socializing online. It really is as simple as that. And then being very intentional about creating occasions and opportunities for every person in the organization to connect with each other out of the context of work. So, if you and I are having working on a project together, the communication between us is very transactional. I inform you about something, I ask you about something, it's very clear. For us to form a bond, it's important that we also connect with each other out of the context of that particular work. And so to create it in a remote environment where you don't have a water cooler or a coffee machine, you need to create those kind of opportunities. And when somebody is just starting an organization, the easiest trick, and it sounds silly, as simple as it is to randomly match them with 10 people around the company and say, go have a 30-minute call with each of these people, no agenda, right? Your agenda is you're new here, right? Yeah. And as long as you do that, and maybe you give them an onboarding buddy, so somebody that can help them understand a little bit the dynamics of the organization, you really, really quickly bootstrap, so to say, the onboarding of that individual.
And I love chatting with you again today. And I always like to, on the final question of the podcast, I always like to reflect on the guest's career, really, and look back, because you've achieved so much success with remote, and I love everything that you're doing. But of course, none of us are able to achieve any amount of success without a little help along the way. So I'm going to ask you now, is that a particular person that you're grateful towards, who maybe saw something in you, invested some time in you, who helped you get where you are today and build this success that you have? Who would that person be and why?
Yeah, I mean, there's essentially two people that put me in a position where I am today. One is my co-founder, Marcelo. We run a business together, we built this together. And the other person, and I don't hear this enough, which is why I think this is a nice question, it's my wife. With two small kids, and I wouldn't be able to do any of this without her help and her jumping in. I take great pride of, being a very present father and being very actively busy with my kids' lives and engaged in everything that they do. But certainly I have a really incredibly busy job, and she spends a lot of work making sure that I'm also unburdened while also having her own career. And so, without her, none of this would be possible.
Yeah, 100% with you on that. I often think to myself, how would I answer that question? And you know what? That is the exact same answer that I would give, because I think it's so important when you are so busy and you're so involved and throw yourself into this work. You need somebody to be there and support you, and it's not as easy as it looks sometimes. And so they are very, very special people. So completely get that. And before I let you go, though, for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about remote, find you or your team online, just explore the topic in a bit more detail, where would you point everyone to?
Remote.com. Can't be easier.
Remote.com. I'll add that to show notes so people can find you nice and easy. I'm not sure if I asked you this first time around, but is there a story behind getting that URL, remote.com? Because it sounds like it's worth a lot of money, but I don't know if you got it early or not.
No, I bought it for somebody. So somebody was running a business there, Nick, and I approached him. I said, look, I want to build a company. I want to call it Remotes, and I want to use this domain. And so we traded equity in Remotes for the domain name. And so I think in the end, it was extremely expensive, but it was probably worth it.
100%. Well, I absolutely love chatting with you again today. As I said, I can't believe it's 2.5 years. So I've got to make a promise to you now on the record. So we can't leave it 2.5 years until you come back on again. But stay in touch. Let me know if there's anything you want to shout about. It'd be great to get you back on and learn more about, hopefully, how these attitudes are going to change, especially here in the UK. But thanks again for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Neil.
I must admit, I am kicking myself that Job has waited 2.5 years to come back on the podcast. And it also scares me how quickly time goes. I don't know if it's if I'm getting older or if the Earth is spinning faster on its axis. I'm not sure what it is. But what I loved about chatting with him now was within a couple of minutes, it felt like our last conversation. We almost pick up where we left off. But as for the topic, I hope, like me, you were a little inspired by the potential of remote hiring, and especially around creating a more diverse, inclusive, and ultimately a globally connected workforce. That has got to be a step forward in progress, right? It was great to hear his insights into the challenges of global recruitment, how to overcome them, especially in these times where remote work is not just an option, but it's a necessity for many businesses now. And I think for every single person, and I include myself in this, no matter where you're located, I think the future of work ultimately lies in our ability as individuals to adapt, innovate, and collaborate beyond borders. And again, that feels incredibly progressive for me, but I am a bit of an old school hippie on stuff like that. I class myself as a citizen of the world more than anything. But before I get too deep and cheesy on you all, just a big thank you for tuning into Tech Talks Daily today. Let me know your thoughts on this topic. It's something that impacts every single person listening. So techblogwriter@outlook.com. If you want to come on here and share your story, happy to do that with you. But other than that, remember, stay curious, stay informed, and a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.